Friends, when we talk about these social security legislations, the most important legislation under the Social Security Act is Provident Fund alone. The reason being, the liability on the side of the employer to implement and remit the EPF contribution is a serious and a severe liability on the side of the employer, and every employer is more worried about the implementation of the Employees Provident Fund Act. When we talk about the Employees Provident Fund Act of 1952, the Act specifically used the word Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act. The word Miscellaneous Provisions Act is used because it is a composite act consisting of Employees Provident Fund Act 1952 to begin with, soon after the independence. And after that, during 1976, the Employees Deposit Linked Insurance of 1976 was introduced, where the employer contributes 5% of the total salary to the fund, and in fact this is a free insurance for the employee. Those employees who are covered under the EPF Act are entitled for a free insurance that is called Employees Deposit Linked Insurance. The employer only need to pay contribution and employee need not, but the benefit only arises only an employee die while in service only. Subsequently, during 1995, the Employees Pension Scheme of 1995 was introduced. The attraction of this scheme is when an employee contributes under the Employees Provident Fund, 8.33% of the salary which arises from the 12% contribution of the employer side will go to the employee's family pension account, that is pension number, account is account number 10 of the Provident Fund. Account number 10 carries your 8.33% of the employer's 12% contribution, and the remaining 3.67 goes to the employee's Provident Fund account, account number 12, where employee's 12% plus the employer's 3.67%, that is totally 15.67 is falling on account number 1 of the employee. The remaining 8.33 goes to the account number 10. This 8.33 is the corpus from which the entire employee's pension is paid by the EPF organization. The eligibility of pension under the pension scheme is when an employee puts in 10 years of service, whether in the same industry or if he is moving out to another industry, the service of the previous establishment with the scheme certificate is carried to the second establishment, even though there is a gap. The service is altogether taken into account, and after attaining the age of 58 years, the employee is entitled for pension. But the fact remains that an employee puts in 10 years of service, even before attaining the age of 58 years, can also draw pension on an earlier date, that is from 50 years onwards. The employee can claim pension before 58 if he is not employed and if he has completed 10 years. But it is called short service pension, and every short period of 1 year the employee is getting a lesser pension of 4% of the pension which he is entitled. Otherwise, had he applied for pension at the age of 58 years. So every year of earlier, that is 50 years means 8 years earlier if he is applying for pension, 8 into 4, that is 8 into 4 is the percentage of less pension the employee is entitled. So what I am telling is the Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, the word used is, it is a composition of Employees Provident Fund Act, employees deposit linked insurance scheme and the employees deposit linked insurance scheme and the employees pension scheme. So those three schemes are composed of into an act that is called, it is called the Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act. In fact, the act, when it was introduced, there was only having an Employees Provident Fund Act 1952. As everybody is aware of, the Act applies to every establishment where 20 or more employees are employed on any day during the preceding 12 months. But it further adds, the Act applies to factory and non-factory establishments. As I told, it applies to factory and non-factory establishments and the establishment that has been notified by the appropriate government. In fact, from 1952 onwards, the Act was introduced. Every addition of various industries was added in the scheduled, and only scheduled employments were brought under the coverage of the Provident Fund Act. The confusion that arises with regard to the Provident Fund applicability to the establishment to all of us is that the bifurcation of the salary element under the Provident Fund Act and the contribution payable by the employer. As a matter of fact, the Act specifically says, or the Act specifically doesn't define what is wages, but the Act defines only basic wages. Unfortunately, the Act doesn't define wages, it defines only basic wages. And the Act, Section 2B of the EPF Act defines wages, and Section 6 of the EPF Act says contribution payable. So a conjoined or a combined reading of Section 2B along with Section 6 only will get an analysis of what is a contribution payable. So on the one side, the 2B, what is basic wages, it includes basic wages, but it specifically excludes DA. But Section 6 says it includes dearness allowance. So by combined reading of Section 2B and Section 6, it is very clear that the contribution is payable to basic wages and dearness allowance, but it does not include HRA, bonus, commission, overtime, or any other similar allowance. What are the similar allowance created? A lot of confusions among the industries, among the various high courts and Supreme Court, and as a result, the never-ending litigation goes on. And even after 60 years of the introduction of the Provident Fund Act, the Act has failed to define what is wages. It complicates the definition of basic wages and a combined reading of contribution under Section 6.